How's it going? Welcome back to everybody's.
All right, I think it is an excellent time for us to get started. I'm not going to beat around the bush too much, but I am going to do a quick introduction and thank everybody for joining us here. My name is Bethany Pearson. I am the program and volunteer coordinator for the Everett Roehl Marshfield Public Library. Thank you to everybody that has joined us this evening for the second family history talks that we will be hosting virtually. We're hoping to continue this moving forward. At any time, you can share with us any feedback you have about how this is going, how the sign-up process or the advertising or the program itself, whether it's the content or how it runs. You can share that with the library and share your information about how it went, if you thought it was excellent or if there's something you thought we could fix on that. I have one individual that has raised their hand. If you have a question or a concern, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. That's going to be the easiest way for me to be able to see what your question is, and then I can address it, but we can move forward with the program. So the chat option, as I mentioned, for everybody participating, you can use that if you're having trouble hearing something or seeing something, you have a very basic, simple question, you can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Should be on the bottom, whether you're on a desktop or on a mobile version. If it's not easily found, there should be 3 dots that are the more option, and you might find it in there. There's also a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Please use this for any questions that are regarding the specific discussion that we're having this evening. And our speaker, Don Schnitzler, will address those questions when he has the opportunity. I always recommend that our presenters every couple of slides or so answer those questions, but we will wrap all of those questions up that are left over at the end and give an opportunity for any other questions to be addressed at that time as well. But I think I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand everything over to our speaker this evening, Don Schnitzler. It's all yours, Don.
All right, thank you, Bethany. I take it that everybody can see the screen all right, so I'm just going to go ahead and start. Tonight's talk is on HeritageQuest Online. I started using HeritageQuest years ago, probably because it was free and it was something I could use at home to look for records before I actually subscribed to some of the other services. It is still free to use at home and it still has lots and lots of information. So I like recommending it to people who are just getting started. It's a simple platform to use. It's similar to Ancestry as far as the searches go, but when it comes to doing the basic searching, you're searching specific databases and it works really slick. So we're going to go through and talk about Ancestry, about family. Now we got to figure out how to advance this. There we go. How to get to HeritageQuest first. And if you were at the webinar last month when we talked about the Ancestry Library Edition, it's basically the same principle. You go to the Everett Roehl Marshfield Public Library homepage where you see the word services. You click on that and that will open up a drop-down box, and you want to click on the one that says Genealogy and History. And it opens up a list of databases that are available through the library. And down toward the bottom of the screen here, you can see the one that says Ancestry Library and HeritageQuest. Last month, we took you to Ancestry Library. Tonight, we're going to take you to HeritageQuest. And so it's just a matter of clicking on the hyperlink there for HeritageQuest, and it takes you to the South Central Library System where you need to enter your library card number. Once you enter the library card number, hit login, it takes you to the home page for HeritageQuest Online. So it's relatively simple. If you're not calling from or listening from the Marshfield Public Library, HeritageQuest is available through almost all libraries, and it's just a matter of going to your local library, looking at electronic resources, and following the steps to get to HeritageQuest. If you have questions, the reference desk at every library is always glad to help out and answer those kinds of questions. When it comes to HeritageQuest Online, there's basically 5 core sets of databases that they talk about with their resources. The biggest one is the census collection. They have US federal censuses. They have them for every extant federal census that exists. So if you're looking for a census record, if Ancestry has it, HeritageQuest has it. If Family Search has it, HeritageQuest has it. They're all available through HeritageQuest online. They also have census records from other countries, limited. You can see that they have the Canadian census records linked in the box there for searching Canadian records. But we're going to spend tonight talking about US records. They also have links to different books, and basically they have 3 sets of things to think about with books: family histories, local histories, and then city directories. And it's pretty amazing what you can find in the collection of books that they have. They've also been known for a long time for having their set of US Revolutionary War pension records, and then the bounty land warrant applications. And so by clicking on the link for the Revolutionary War records, it'll take you to those records to search. And then the 4th and 5th ones are probably less frequently used, at least in central Wisconsin. But one is for the Freedmen's Bank, which has about 480,000 names in it. It's used mostly for African American research, and it's a cool site. It's a cool database. And then the U.S. Congressional Serial Set are government records. And today I found something really surprising when I was kind of doing a little research, getting ready for the talk. And when we get to the last one of these core sets, I'll show you an example of what you can find on these congressional serial sets. So we'll get started. And if you want to get started doing a search on HeritageQuest, it's real easy. You can use any of the boxes in the center of the screen to search for, let's say, census records or books or Revolutionary Wars. Those are filters to specifically those sets of databases. Or you can go to the upper top left-hand search button in the header and click there, and it takes you to another set of filtered links. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the census records and work forward through those 5 core sets, and then just highlight a couple things with some of the other records that are available. Now, when I look at this screen, the first thing that's important to mention is that there are multiple, I don't want to say pages, but multiple sets of boxes here or links here to different records. So you got census records across the top, books, wills and probates, city directories, military records, immigration records. And if you scroll down, you come up with public records, Social Security, Revolutionary War, and other records that you can search. So there's a lot of things to search. And what's nice about them is they put them right in front of you on their homepage when you're looking for information. Makes it very easy to use. Now, one of the things when you first get started, and I mentioned this last month when we talked about Ancestry Online, is you want to work from the known to the unknown. When you're doing your research and just getting started, you start with what you know about yourself first, and then you work backwards. One of the great tools for doing that is a pedigree chart. It helps kind of keep you in line with information. And so we're going to talk or use William Upham again tonight for an example, as much as we can anyway. And you can see here we started with William Upham, who was the mayor of the city of Marshfield, major employer in Marshfield, eventually the governor of the state of Wisconsin for 1 term, and then came back to Marshfield to live the rest of his life. But looking at this pedigree chart, you can trace his family back, and he was an 8th generation individual in the United States. His great-great-great-great-grandfather, John Upham, landed in Massachusetts sometime in the 1600s. But you can use this chart to kind of tell where the holes are in your research. And it kind of, when you see like Sarah Upham here listed and a blank space there, it kind of gives you some direction about where to look. The other thing we talked about last time was a group sheet, or family group sheet, where you record data about individual families. And here's an individual family group sheet for William Upham and his first wife, Mary Cornelia Kelly. They had 2 adopted daughters, Elsie and Caroline, and you can see that this is the complete family unit for that family. Mr. Upham's first wife died in 1912, and he remarried a second time, and so there would be a separate sheet for his second family. So you'd have Mr. Upham, Grace Mason Upham for the second wife, and then their two sons listed. We also talked about the importance of working from a timeline, so you can kind of see the progression of things that happen in an individual's life. And what you want to do is you want to look from the time a person is born until the time he died, and see that you can find certain records to complete your search. And so this is just a list of facts from his Family Tree Maker program, or the Family Tree Maker program for the Upham family. You can see we have his birth in 41. He was living in Massachusetts in 1850. In 1860, he was living in Michigan in Calhoun, and going on, he went into the service in 61 down to the time he died in 1924. And so this kind of gives you a timeline. With some of the genealogy programs, you can list them as facts, you can list them as timeline. Timeline gives you a little bit, it gives you more information, but it doesn't fit on the screen. So I just decided to use this as an example. I also talked last time about using a program through Ancestry itself. If you have an account, you can create an online family tree. And this is an example of a timeline that's generated through that site. And if you were with us last month, you also remember that I brought this up and I showed you that one of the things that you want to try to do is find the census records for each decade. So the censuses were done on the even years, 1790, 1800, 1810, and so on. And you can see going through Mr. Upham's timeline here that we're missing the 1870 census, and we were missing the 1910 census. Last month, we talked about how to find the 1910 census by using first names only, forgetting the search for last names, and that showed you that that worked. Tonight, we're going to go back to the old school method of going page by page looking for a census record, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So a little bit about the federal census records. Population schedules were actually established back in the 1780s. I want to say 1787. But what they said is that every 10 years there would be a count of the people living in the United States. And so between 1790 and 1940, the census records are available for us to look at. Now, just the point is that there were census records taken in 1950, 60, 70, 80, and we just completed the 2020 census. Records are only available after 72 years. There's a 72-year privacy rule. So the 1950 census won't be available for another couple of years. But that's one thing to keep in mind. And then when it comes to the census records, each new census that's taken, whether it's 1790, 1800, 1810, the records evolve, and there's things that are added and changed as far as the questions go. And so between 1790 and 1840, these were head of household census records, where they recorded the head of the household and then only listed the number of people by age brackets or by sex or by race, free and slave in there, so that there was counts, hash marks basically, not an every name index. The every name index didn't start until 1850, and not index, every name census records didn't start until 1850. We still do them with every name today, and they're kind of the gold mine for genealogists because it gives you either a defined relationship between the head of the household and the people living in the house, or an implied relationship in some of the earlier ones where they didn't list if it was a spouse, a son, a daughter, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, father, mother, whatever. So the 1850 to 1940 contains every name. There were some special census records done, 1850 and 1860. There were the slave schedules that were taken, and those are available to search. And then between 1850 and 1880, there's what they refer to as the non-population schedules. And a lot of times these get overlooked, and they're really cool census records to look at. And so we'll as we're going through this tonight, we'll show you a couple examples of those. So back to our question. We wanted to look specifically for Mr. Upham on the 1870 census. And one of the things that is nice about HeritageQuest is they have this breakdown where you can just click on a year and you'll be searching only that year. So in the box that says US Census, there's a record of all the available census records. You can click on it and it will take you to a search box that you can search for the 1870 federal census. Now, typically what we do when we get to this search box is the first thing we do is we put in a name, first name, middle name, last name, and then some other information. And when I search for federal census records or help people search for federal census records, I always recommend that they include less information because you get better results with less information. Seems like less is more. And then if you get too many things to look at, you can always add some other parameters to it to narrow the search results. So in this case, searching for the 1870 federal census, when we first started doing this, we put in William H. Upham and we put in Kewanee, Wisconsin. We put that there because from notes that Mrs. Upham kept in her diary, they should have been living in Kewanee in 1870. And we put down, I think, the year of birth and hit return to see what happens. Now, what happened then was nothing came up for the Uphams in Kewanee, Wisconsin. Today, because I've gone through and made some corrections to their indexing, you'll actually get the first record that comes up, William H. Open. And what happened when the names were, well, actually what happened when the names were recorded, I don't know if it was Mrs. Upham or Mr. Upham, but when they pronounced their last name, it was recorded as Open, and Open didn't come up in the search for Upham. The little pencil mark that's behind that name in the circle tells you that somebody edited the indexing, and now that that's done, the name is indexed as both William H. Open and William H. Upham. And you can see that when we go to the record and look here. The first name up on the top where it says William H. Open, that is how the record was originally indexed by the indexers working on these census records. And then someone wrote back to the company, reported that the name was incorrectly transcribed and it should have been William H. Upham. And then they keep the original and they also put down the correction that they received. One of the things I want to point out, and this is something that if you're just getting started, that's really important, is make it a habit of citing your sources. So when you look at this particular record, you can see that there's another circle down there that says the source citation. It tells you where the census, what census year it was, where it was taken, what microfilm roll it is on, and what page it is on. And by writing these pieces of information on census records that you might send to yourself or might not be real clear to read, you can always go back and retrace your steps, and that's important. Now, if we click on the box that says view over here, it will take us to the actual record. We'll do that in a second. But I also wanted to mention that from this screen, you can send these documents home. If you're using HeritageQuest at the library and you want to send the copy home to your own computer, you can just add an email, and it's just a matter of clicking on that send document. It will ask you to put in your email address, and then it will ask you to verify your email address, and you hit send, and you get a message at home that looks something like this. And it comes from Ancestry because HeritageQuest is actually a Ancestry product. It comes looking like this, though, that says that you've found a record. It's for William H. Opham, and then you can download the image or the print-friendly version. And so when you click on, we'll do the download the image first, you actually get the full census page for that particular record. And if you look, you can see that line 18 has Open, William H., retired lieutenant, age 28, born in Massachusetts, and his wife, Mary, age 26, the housekeeper, with real estate valued at $800. I always get a kick out of this one because If you go and look at most census records, the wife isn't listed as holding the real estate, it's the husband. And in this case, it's Mary. I don't know what that means, but it's just an interesting thing to notice on this particular record. Now, if you look up at the top, it tells you that this census was taken in Kewaunee County, Wisconsin. The date of the census was the second day of June. And then it says that it's page 407. And that gives you all the information you need for recording the source. But it's a little bit more difficult to read than if you would have hit the print-friendly version. On the print-friendly version, you see William H. Upham, his age, his birth year, his birthplace, the dwelling number, that is the number of the census taker visited this house, the 22nd house it visited for recording the information. And then you have William and Mary's information down there. But again, it provides the source information. And so if I print one, I would print two, I would print the actual copy of the document, and then I would also print the source citation to attach to it, just to kind of cover your bases on documenting the sources. Now, I mentioned that when we first did this search, it failed. I had looked for William Upham and it came up empty. There was nothing, no response or no hit for an Upham in Kewaunee County, Wisconsin in 1870. But I knew from the information that was provided that Mrs. Upham had said that she had said that Will added an addition to their house in Kewaunee in May of 1870. The census was taken in June of 1870. So if they had a house in Kewaunee and were living there, they should have appeared in the census. So we can go back to the old school way of looking at things. And what you can do is you can browse this collection. You can pick the state, the county, and then the township that you want to look at. And when you do that, it will actually bring up the first page of that particular township for the census. And then you can just go page by page looking to see if you can find the people that you're looking for. Now, because this was kind of geared for beginners, I wanted to kind of just quickly run through the navigation pages on either HeritageQuest or Ancestry when it comes to census records. If you look over at the arrow number 1, there's a slider there that you can increase and decrease the magnification. If you look at the arrow number 2, it will open a window that gives you additional details about the census records, and I'll show you that in a minute. Down below, you can push on that icon below the number 2 arrow, and it will bring up the index for the names that are on that census record below. And then if you want to look at a film strip view, you click on the film strip view where 3 is, and it will bring up a film strip view for going through each of the records. And I'll show you what each of these do. Number 4 goes to the next page or to the previous page. So here's the details. When you look at number 2, you click on that and it brings up the 1870 federal census, and it tells you basically what you're highlighting on this page. The first thing you should notice is nothing's highlighted. When you're searching for a census record and you haven't found a match through Ancestry search engine, the screen is all blank. They're not really highlighting any particular record. And so you'll have to identify the person you want to talk about. In that case, when it comes to this screen, the window is empty. Now, I've gone through and I've highlighted Mr. and Mrs. Upham's name, and then we'll just talk about some of the things that you can find in those 3 fields. And it's a matter of selecting the source, the related information, or the details to get this drop-down information. So the source, again, it's very important you record the sources. And so Ancestry and HeritageQuest make it possible to do this very easily by just clicking on the source, and it brings up the information about that particular page in the census. And okay, and here it says page 407A, again, the 1870 Wisconsin census for the Kewaunee County in the township of Kewaunee. So you have that documentation you need as far as where you found the information. Next button over gives you hints, basically hints of other records that are available for this particular individual. And so when we click on related, we see that there's a hint there, a suggested record for Find a Grave, 1880 Federal Census, newspapers.com obituary, and then the 1920 Federal Census. And what's interesting is if you see the 1880 census spelling and the 1920 census spelling, there are two other variations of the Upham name. When it came to recording names, the census takers didn't always record names the way we think they should be spelled. So you have to have an open mind when you're doing a search as to what the possibilities might be. And then the last button there is the details, and the details give you the information. And what I think is interesting on this, they have highlighted, indexed it with the alternate name that I submitted, and then they have the original name below it. And then they have the information from the census records that he was 28 years old, that his birth year was approximately 1842. He lived in, or came from Massachusetts. The dwelling number, where he was located, he was a retired lieutenant at age 28. But you can see how you get that information off of that little detail area of this microfilm screen. You go down to the bottom and you click that icon with the silhouette of the two heads, you get an index that pops up, and you can see here I've highlighted William Upham's name there. And because I have the cursor, when I did this, I had the cursor on the line above it. It shows up as brown. But what I've selected is Mr. Upham's name. Since that's the selected one, it highlights it in a yellow color. And then the people that are in his household are highlighted in green. And so Mary is kind of, as part of his household, highlighted also. And George is just a mistake as far as being highlighted there. The other one is the film strip view. And for those of us that are older and remember cranking the handheld or the microfilm readers, the handle on the microfilm readers to look at things, this works pretty much the same way. You open up the film strip there and you can go page to page looking at the information. And I think the Kewaunee County was about 15 pages. And when it came to finding Mr. and Mrs. Upham, I was very lucky that they were located on the third page. But otherwise, it's just a matter of scrolling through those pages and looking at the names on the list. I actually like looking at the names on the list better than looking at the index names, because sometimes it just makes more sense when you see them written out that that's what you're looking for. And that's probably just a personal preference, but I open up the index, but I always look at the names on the census record itself. So one of the things that I wanted to point out with this is the difference between Ancestry Library Edition and HeritageQuest as far as what they provide for people to use at home. And this is, I should preface that as HeritageQuest is always available to use at home. Ancestry Library is available right now because of the pandemic. But if you look at the search screens, they're identical. If you look at the record sets that are available to search, they're identical. So when it comes to whether you use Ancestry Library Edition or HeritageQuest, you're looking at the same collection and you should find the same information in either source. The important thing to keep in mind is HeritageQuest is typically open for remote access from your house, whereas Ancestry Library now is just an exception. And so that again will go back probably sometime at, well, right now it's open until the end of April. It could be extended. They're going to look at it again on a month-to-month basis. But eventually it will be back so that it's used in the library only. And HeritageQuest will be your source for the same type of information from home. Now, I mentioned the non-population schedules. I also said the non-population schedules are really cool, or I was trying to get that across, because you'd find a completely different set of information. And so when it comes to the non-population schedules, most of them are done between 1850 and 1880. There were some social statistics that were added on to state census records in 85 and 95. So you may find some other non-population schedules associated with state census records. But when it comes to the federal census, 1850 through 1880 are the years that people usually talk about. Now, in order to find those on HeritageQuest, HeritageQuest makes them very easy to find. You have your mortality schedule and your agriculture and industrial schedules right there on the main page. And so it's a matter of picking one of them and clicking. We'll start at the top and go down. So looking for mortality schedules. If you haven't used a mortality schedule before, it's really important that you read the information that describes what they are, because it gives you an idea, it helps you interpret the information that you're going to find. And so if I can make a recommendation, regardless of what database you're using and what search engine you're using, when you come up to a new set of data, you want to scroll down and look at the description. And so with Ancestry or with HeritageQuest, or even Family Search, there's always a description of what that particular set of records includes. And so you want to sit down and start off by reading those. And what this does here is it kind of tells you that what you're going to find on these mortality schedules is a record of the deaths that occurred in a specific area for the previous 12 months to the census year. Now, 1850 to 1880, the census day was June 1st or 2nd. It was early June. That's when the census records were completed. And so if you're looking at the mortality schedule, you're going to be looking for June of 1849 to June or May 31st of 1850. And those records will be the people that died in that particular township at on that list. And then you can see what some of the things that are included. And I can tell you that I didn't find all of this in every record that I've looked at, but usually you have the person's name, their age, where they were living. And then the big one that you kind of pay attention to is the cause of death. What's important about these is when you're talking about the late 1800s, death records weren't necessarily always recorded. So it gives you a snapshot of what was causing the deaths to some people in certain communities. And it might be that you're lucky enough to find people that in your family connected to that. So let me show you an example. Here's the search engine for the US Federal Census Mortality Schedule, 1850 to 1885. And I don't have a particular name that I want to look for, but I know that my parents or grandparents' family lived in 1870. This was just before they came to Wisconsin. They were living in a community in Warren County, New York, called Hague. And so what I did was I searched for 1870 New York, and then picked Warren County and brought up the town of Hague and Warren County, New York, and the mortality schedule for that year. And what they have is 10 people from that area died. Now, this was not a real populated area. It was actually on the top of a mountain alongside Lake George. Well, the town was down next to the lake, and my family lived up on the top of the mountain. But in this list of people are names that I recognize because they were mentioned in different records that my family had. And actually Burnham Tupper, the third individual, he was the father-in-law of two of my great-great aunts. And so one of the things that I think is interesting is you find out how old people are when they pass away, where they were born, the month that they died, what their occupation was, and then also what was the cause of death. And in this case, the number of people that died of consumption kind of jumps out at you. But that TB was pretty common back then. The other thing that's important to mention is that these numbers in the first column, number of the family is given in this column, refers to where you can find their family in the census records. So if I went to the 19th family in the 1870 Town of Hague census, that's where I would find Burnham Tupper's family listed. So they're kind of a cool record that if you have family in an area, you should check it out. Now, I wanted to look for Wisconsin. They are available in Wisconsin. My family wasn't in Wisconsin. My Spencer family wasn't in Wisconsin in 1870. So I just did a search for the name Spencer to see what I could find. And in this one, this is from down in Milwaukee County, the town of Brookfield. And there's a list of people that are there that passed away. And there's a Mahalan Spencer. She's not a relative of mine, but again, it goes through, it gives her age, where she was born, the date of her death in this case. Usually they're just recorded as the month, but this time it gives you the date, what her occupation was, and what was the cause of her death. And so if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity to look at these, you may find something about a family member that you won't find anywhere else, because at the time they weren't recording these deaths or these vital events on a regular basis. So check out the mortality schedules. Another one that I think is pretty cool are the agricultural schedules. And again, what you want to do when you start looking at these non-population schedules is scroll down and look at the information. And what I think is important to point out is that they are not available for every state on HeritageQuest, Ancestry, or Family Search. And if you look here, Wisconsin is not included. Now, Wisconsin, the State Historical Society, I believe in the back of my head, has some for the state of Wisconsin, but it's been a long time since I've looked at them, and I can't swear to it, but in the back of my head, I think it's true. So anyway, you want to look at that kind of description to find out where those records are available, and then you want to do a search. And so again, I'm going to use my great-great-grandparents, Robert and Mary Spencer, who lived in Hague, Warren County, New York. And you can either do a search for it by name, or you can go to the browse collection and pick the state, pick the county, pick the year and the locality, and find it that way. And so this is what pulled up when I did the search. It has Robert Spencer, wrong county, Robert Spencer, wrong county. And it has Captain Robert Spencer in the right location. The Captain Robert Spencer bothered me because no idea where that came from. He was a corporal in the Civil War, so it didn't make sense. But anyway, it looks like that's my Robert Spencer. So I open it up and open the page up and look at it. And what you end up with is a large sheet of paper that recorded 21 items on the first page. Everything from the amount of land that Mr. Spencer had. He had 55 acres that were improved, 156 acres that were unimproved. He had a value of the property of about $1,500. It goes through and talks about the number of horses, the number of cattle, milk cows, oxen, and then other livestock. He had 12 other cattle. I'm not sure if those were sheep. No, it wouldn't be sheep, but he had 12 other cattle. But you can see for a farm up on the top of a mountain, he had quite a productive year. And this was only part of it. This was the first side of the sheet. You go to the other side of the sheet, it continues up. So there's 48 different items that they were reporting. The first time this was seen by one of my third cousins over in Michigan, she got all excited because she likes to spin wool. And when she was looking at this, she said that great-great-grandma Mary Spencer was a spinner because of the fact that she had sheep, and I think this is flax in there is mentioned also. So they give you another set of information that you don't typically have access to If you're lucky enough to find something that a family lived in an area where there was an agricultural schedule, or if you had family that were involved with industries, factories and things, it's important to look at those to see what they were up to. The last one I wanted to kind of mention as far as the census records has to do with the 1890 veteran schedule. If you click on view all, it brings you up to that list that I showed you when we were talking about the records between HeritageQuest and Ancestry. But on here you can see the 1890 schedule, the veteran schedule is listed, and the 1890 federal census is listed right above it. Just a heads up, just in case you haven't heard or don't know, the 1890 federal census is the one census that the majority of it is gone. In 1922, there was a fire. The records were destroyed. Some records were destroyed. Some were waterlogged, and eventually they were all thrown away, except for somewhere a little over 6,000 records still exist. And that's what they refer to as the fragment. But there's the information that was pulled from these records over the years for the veterans, the Civil War veterans. And so we want to look at that. And again, you come up with this search box, and all you have to do is put in a people's name. We'll do William Upham because we know he was a Civil War soldier, and we know that he lived in Marshfield. And so we did William H. Upham, and you can see the first name on the top of the list is William H. Upham, Marshfield, Wisconsin, and that he was first, it's supposed to be lieutenant, and then his years of service was 1861 to 1869. Just as a point of reference, his older brother Calvin was also in the service during the Civil War, and that's him in the second line, and he lived down in Ripon, Wisconsin. Now, this is what the actual 1890 veteran schedule looks like when you see a page, and it's difficult. I hope you can see William Upham, but if not, down there on line 24 and 25, you see Mr. Upham is listed with 2 entries. In the first one on 24, he's listed as a private serving in Company F, 2nd Regiment, Wisconsin, and that he entered the service 18 June 1861, and he was discharged 13 May 1862. And then his name appears again where it says William H. Upham in line 25, 1st Lieutenant, and it gives his unit there. And here it says that he enlisted the 17th day of June, 1862, and he served until 19 November, 1869. Now, the reason he has 2 distinct entries is because he was in the service and then he was out of the service, and then he went back into the service. What's important for us to keep in mind on here is the way this form is set up is down below, they record injuries that these soldiers had. And so if we look down below on line 24, you can see where Marshfield, Wood County, Wisconsin is listed. And it shows that Mr. Upham received a gunshot wound. And for those that aren't familiar with the story, the first Battle of Bull Run, Mr. Upham was shot in the chest, left for dead on the battlefield, reported dead. They actually commemorated his life in Racine, Wisconsin. They held funeral and everything, and then found out later that he survived the wounds and had been taken prisoner and was in a prisoner of war camp in Richmond, Virginia. Then when he was released from that, he went back to the West Point, or graduated, or was appointed to West Point by Abraham Lincoln and graduated, and was given the rank of second lieutenant first and then first lieutenant before he resigned his commission in November of 1869. So one last thing on census records, and that is the census map guide. And this one I mentioned when we talked last month about Ancestry, and it wasn't working then. You click on the census map guide there, or up across the top where it says maps, and it will take you to a map that looks like this. And it's an interactive map for 1790 to 1920. And what you can do is we click on Wisconsin, it brings up a map like this, and it shows you that when Wisconsin, before Wisconsin was actually a state, there were 2 counties, Brown County and Crawford County. The black lines on these maps are showing you what the county borders were or county boundaries were at that particular time. So in 1820, the division between Brown and Crawford County runs right through Portage and Marathon County. In 1830, the boundaries changed, and so we've got Iowa County forming down below. And you can see that those current county lines then were in black, and the white lines that are popping up are showing are the existing lines of today's counties. And you can go through and check the growth of all of the counties just by going through these decades down on the side. Now, I won't go through all of them, but you can see as we get to 1860 and 1870, the lower half of the state, most of the counties are established as similar to what they are today. And by the time we get to 1890, you can see that most of the counties, again, look similar to what they do today, but there are still some counties that were going to be created after 1890. The area in the circle there shows that this federal census that was taken in 1890, there are no remnants of the 1890 census left other than the special veterans schedule. And if we go back on each of the pages, there's a little spot that tells you that the census records are available for all the other years except this one. By 1920, you can see that the counties are all pretty much formed. There's one county left to be formed, and that's Menominee County. And you can see that over out of Partitiono County, Oconto County, and Langley, well, on the edge of Langley County, where that will come into being after 1920. This is really handy, though, for if you're looking for census records and you're not looking for them as far as being indexed, where you do a search for them, but if you're going to look for them by hand, to know what county existed and where those records would have been filed as far as what county. So in 1830, for example, if you were looking at something in Marathon County, there's a good chance part of it could be in Brown County and part of it could be in Crawford County. So you'd have to know where people lived and then know where the boundaries were to decide what to look for. Books are also an important resource, and I think sometimes that I don't know if we underappreciate books or not, but with this particular database, there's some good books in there. And what I always think about it is you find things that you didn't expect to find. So the books are basically divided into three categories: people, publications, and city directories. They have a lot of city directories that were added in 2015. The size of the books, it's somewhere over 28,000 different books that you can search easily. And if you think about them, the one way to think about it is people and places as far as the books, what the broad categories are. And so when you're going to do a search, you come up to this page here. You can either search the books there. Well, I guess that's where you'd want to start. And then when you pull up this page, you can see you can look for people, publications, and city directories. Now, city directories are really handy pieces of information because you can find out where families lived, addresses for where they lived. Once you have an address, you can do a Google search on that address to see what it looks like today. So city directories are kind of fun. Sometimes they list occupations, who else is in the household, things like that. So again, you want to read and find out what information is available, what databases are represented. And what I was really looking for when I scrolled down to the bottom, this was something that said, these are the cities or towns where you can find the city directories, or the places you can find city directories for. And it doesn't show up easy on the first search. So I went back to the basic search for what I could find. I put in William H. Upham in Marshfield, Wood County, Wisconsin. Now, Marshfield did have a city directory in the 1890s, but it's not one that's been digitized. But I did find two particular records here that I thought were interesting. William H. Upham living in West Palm Beach, Florida, with his second wife, Grace Upham, in 1924. And then William H. Upham in 1896 living in Madison, Wisconsin. And then if you look at that red circle off to the side there, what I was looking for was to learn more about this particular database. And after you search for it, it comes up here and you can actually do a search for it. Now, I think what I did was I wanted to show you these. This is the first one, William Upham living in Florida. And it's William H. Upham, his second wife, Grace. It says that they lived in a home. When I looked at that W, and the W shows up on just about all these, I thought maybe it meant they wintered in Florida, because there's an address and then Marshfield, Wisconsin follows it. And if you look, all these other people that are living there, they all have and St. Louis, Missouri, and Asheville, North Carolina, and Troy, New York. So obviously that this was a community where people were spending their winters, snowbirds, down in Florida in the 1920s. You always want to see if you can find the index, so you can actually pull this up and browse it, and you'll find that on page 101 there's abbreviations and what they stand for, and the W is for West. And so all of these W's are West, and then North, East, and South all had N, E, and S. But there's a list of other abbreviations that kind of help. But a W with a parentheses around it, I didn't think of West. So anyway, so that was that information. And then the other one that was listed there that was obviously Mr. Upham was William H. Upham in 1896, living in Madison, Wisconsin. For those of us that are familiar with the story of Mr. Upham was elected governor in 1895 and spent 1896 and 97 in Madison as the governor of the state of Wisconsin. Here you can see his name, his wife's name, and his occupation, and then that he lived on Gilman Street. And his daughter, Caroline, is a couple up above that, also living on Gilman Street. Now, we talked about learning more about this database. What you can do is you can click on that and it will bring up a drop-down box for selecting the state, then selecting the cities, and then selecting the years. So you can actually browse the city directories, each one by year, at your leisure. Second column, or the middle column there, as far as publications or the books go, are referred to as publications, and it just brings up a really long list of books. And if you look, you'll see there's genealogies there, there's county histories, there's town histories, there's church histories, just a whole spectrum of different types of records that are available for it. And to search it, the best thing to do is just start picking things to narrow down the search. So what I did was I put in Upham, because I wanted to see how many things were related to Mr. Upham. And when I did that, I came up with an Upham genealogy, the descendants of John Upham of Massachusetts, who came from England in 1835, and then talks about the children and grandchildren and descendants of him. And that would be our Mr. Upham's family. So I pulled that open. And when you open up one of these books that you can find, you can search them by name using their search box, and which is very convenient. But if you're going to try to search for a family history, in this case, the Upham genealogy, if you tried to search for William Upham, you'd be going page by page by page, because the family like to reuse names. And so you want to pick a name to search for somebody else that ties into the family. In this case, I picked Mary Cornelia Kelly because that would pull up Mr. Upham when it pulls her up. And by doing that, it took me right to page 369. And you can see William Henry Upham. It gives his lineage back to John Upham. He was the 8th generation Upham from the original John Upham. Gives his date of birth, his wife's name, the date of their marriage, some information about the war, and then it goes on and talks about him being taken prisoner and it follows up on the next page. But again, it's a resource. It's very easy to get to, but we tend not to think about it on a routine basis for checking there. The other thing I wanted to kind of see, as long as I was looking, I thought, well, how about if we look for the guy who is credited with naming Marshfield, or the town is named after. And so in the family history books, I looked for Massachusetts. The man Marshfield is supposed to be named after was Samuel Marsh, or after John J. Marsh, his nephew. And so I wanted to see what I could find. So I put in Massachusetts, and I knew that they came from Essex County, Massachusetts. I did a search, and sure enough, the history of Essex County, Massachusetts came up with biographical sketches of people. Put in the name Samuel Marsh, and on page, what was that, 76 of a 1,200-page book, we have a story about all the Marshes. It mentions John J. Marsh. It mentions Samuel Marsh. Actually, the image on page 77 is a picture of John J. Marsh, who is credited with giving Marshfield the first 500 books for the Marshfield Public Library back in the 1870s, and supposedly naming the city after, or the town, after his uncle Samuel Marsh, who died in the spring of 1872, or sometime in 1872. So lots of information you can find. And then I thought we'd go back to the people. Now, people is where you're supposed to be able to find family histories and things listed. So I thought I'd switch gears and look for one of my paternal sides of the family. So my great-grandmother on the Schnitzler side was a Mathiesen, and her family came from Minnesota. I just was looking to see what I could find. And so I put in Mathiesen and put in Minnesota, and it pulled up 6 different records. And the first one is for someone in New Jersey. I can't put any connection there, but the one from Montana, the ones from Montana there are actually related to my Mathiesens. And then the bottom one was kind of a surprise, because this guy down here that circled in, Robert Gerald Kepner, was actually at my wedding. He was married to my dad's second cousin. But what's interesting is his great-grandparents were Mathiesens, or one of them was a Mathiesen, and so were our great-grandparents. It was a brother and sister, and then descendants eventually married distant cousins. And so it was a family history that they didn't know existed, and I didn't know existed, and it just fell into my lap using HeritageQuest for the search engine. So we'll go on to military records quick. And the big thing about military records for HeritageQuest have always been the Revolutionary War pension records. And when it comes to pension records, there could be disability for people who were injured in the service or became invalids because of, or as a result of things, their service. There are people that receive service disability, not service disability, but service pensions, and then also surviving spouses, either that became widows during the revolution or after the revolution, if they met certain qualities or certain qualifications. And then also because land was given as an incentive to get people to join the service or to reward people for service, you may find some bounty land warrants. So when it comes to searching, one of the first things you should always keep in mind when you're searching for something, it doesn't pay to search for something that doesn't exist. So if we're going to search Revolutionary War records, in this case for the applications for the actual pensions, it wouldn't pay to search for William H. Upham. But if you go think back about that pedigree chart, we had his grandfather who was born in the late 1700s, early 1700s, and died in 1833. Anyway, he would have been the right age for being in the military service during the Revolutionary War. So I put in Mr. Upham's first name and last name, and it pulls up one record for Jonathan Upham, who applied for a pension in 1833, and his wife was Sarah. And if you remember that pedigree chart, William Upham's grandparents were Jonathan and Sarah Upham. And so I open up the record, and it brings up a little bit more information. He was from Massachusetts. There's a widow's pension application, and there was also inside the same files a service pension record for Jonathan Upham. So you open it up and you come up with the top envelope. There's actually, if you look at the film strip down across the bottom, there are 15 particular records associated with Mr. Upham's service or with his wife's pension request. One of them goes through and talks here on the upper right-hand corner. It's Jonathan Upham applying for the pension, original pension. And then on the upper left-hand column, you can see the word dead written. It talks about the fact that he died on, what was it, 3 April 1840, he died. And so one of the things that's nice about these pension records is you find out different pieces of information and different people providing information to help support the claim of either the individual who's the veteran or his surviving spouse or children. So just on this one page, you've got the date of application, you know he's alive, and then you can see when he died. And then it takes a little bit to get used to reading these, but if you look at it long enough, you can see that he lives in the county of Worcester, which is where Westminster, Massachusetts is, which is where William Upham was born. It talks about on this day, this 8th day of August, 1832, Mr. Upham personally came before the county court, and it goes on and talks about some other stuff, but it gives lots of information. If I tried to decipher it again right now, I'd bore you to death, but there's information in there that's really important. Then again, you can see here in August 12th, 1843, his wife is there. It says the man's name was John Upham and Jonathan Upham, and she's claiming a pension for as a widow. And there's another one, and maybe I didn't save that. There's a really cool one because it's actually it's an affidavit completed by Mr. Upham's father, saying that Mrs. Upham, Sarah Upham, his mother, was living with them, and she had no means to support herself, and that she was living with the Upham family in Westminster, Massachusetts. So when you're looking at this, all at once you realize that Mr. Upham grew up with his grandmother living in the house with him, which is just kind of a nice little piece of extra information that you might not find somewhere else. Now, you can find the military records, the pension records, available on Ancestry and also on Family Search, but they're just very easy to search here and find the information quickly. I wanted to point out something also. That's why you see two arrows on this screen. They build in a lot of redundancy in the way you can search with this, so you don't have to look as hard. But you see you have search military records here, and then you have Revolutionary War listed. And then lower right-hand corner, you have another blue arrow that points to just Revolutionary War pensions. If you open both of those up side by side, one brings you to all of their military records. The first filtered box there says U.S. Revolutionary Pension Records. If you click on it, it takes you to what you see on the right-hand side, which is what you also got if you clicked on just the Revolutionary records from the previous screen. What I wanted to point out is there are other military records that are available on HeritageQuest. I'm not going to spend any time on them, but you can see that there's Confederate records, prisoner of war records, and that they have military records from foreign countries. In this case, there's something about Columbia military records. And if you scroll down on the left here, you can see they have German records, they have Florida Confederate, Kentucky Confederate, Louisiana Confederate, Louisiana War of 1812. There's a list of other military records that you can search. And each one works basically the same way as what we've done so far, where a search box pulls up. You can either search by the name or browse a particular set of records. The fourth set of records that they consider a core set of records for the HeritageQuest is the Freedmen's Bank records. This was actually passed in 1865, and it was set up as a banking system for the newly freed slaves in the country. And there were 29,000, let's see, not 29,000, 29 different banking institutions across the southern states. There were 61,000 subscribers to that, and they had about 480,000 pieces, individual names that were recorded there. It was established in 65. It went bankrupt in 1874, but what's cool about it is all the records, well, I shouldn't say all the records, these records still exist, and 480,000 names. Now, the majority of them are for African Americans, but in some of the cities, they were also people of European descent that were members of this bank. And so they have records also. And this is what you do is let me see here a second. Okay, there you go. You go to the search box, and the search box brings up, you have to scroll down to get to the Freedmen's Bank. And you click on that and it brings up a search box. Now, I didn't have a particular name to look for, so I just pulled one record so you could see what it looks like. This is a record that was done in 1865, and it was for a man named Isaiah Woodson. It says the name of his master was Phil Woodson. Gives a description, it gives the name of his children, gives the place of his birth, and then most of them have remarks about if something happens to them, where the money should go. I think it's just an interesting set of records. Some will list the names of the children and which ones are surviving. Some will list the names of the parents and if they are living or deceased. So you can get a lot of information about a family history on these records. And in most of the records that were taken after the Civil War, they cross off name of master and name of mistress, and they put down where people were living. So you actually get information about where some of these people were living. It's a really cool set of records. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about was the U.S. serial set. And when I think about government records, I think boring. I mean, they're not going to be something that you're going to spend a lot of. It says search memorials, petitions, private relief actions, and things like that. And so you open it up, and it brings up a search box. And since we've been using William H. Upham tonight, that's the first thing I search for. And I put William Upham's name in. It brings up the results: citizens of Windham County, Vermont, for restoring deposits to Bank US. I opened it up and it was just a list of names, and there was a name William H. Upham. As I said before, the Upham family is notorious for reusing names, and so there's a good chance this William H. Upham has nothing to do with our William H. Upham from here in Marshfield. So I just ignored it. Then I went back and I wanted to try to do a search just for Marshfield, Wisconsin, to see what would show up with Marshfield, Wisconsin. And when I hit return, it brought up two records, and it says relief of Sue Van Ryn, Don Van Ryn, and the estate of Margaret Braceman. When I first saw that, I thought, holy cow, I know those people. I never met Sue and I never met Margaret, but I knew Don Van Ryn very well. And actually, Sue Van Ryn was a Sternitsky, and my wife's family descends from the Sternitsky family out by Granton. And so this is shirt-tail relatives to my wife's family. And I thought that was pretty exciting. So I opened it up, and it was just a matter of clicking on it. And it brings up, it says there's 3 hits in the record. So it mentions Marshfield 3 times. And that if I wanted to open up the document, you click on the 3 hits and it says view. And it opens up 15 pages of information about the Sue Van Ryn, Donald Van Ryn, and then the estate of Margaret Braceman. And what happened here was in 1934, William Van Ryn was in a car accident where he was hit by 3 vehicles from the Civilian Conservation Corps. William was killed, their daughter Teresa was killed, Margaret died, and Donald and Sue were injured. And what this document does is it goes through and talks about everything related to that accident, to the estate, to the things that they had to pay out of their own pocket after the accident, hospital bills, funeral expenses, how they were living. There's affidavits in here from everybody in town. Well, not everybody in town, but 15 pages of affidavits documenting what happened the day of the accident, what happened after it, where the family was surviving or staying after the accident. It has a lot of valuable information for a family historian. So all at once, government records don't seem so boring. This was just one search for Marshfield, Wisconsin. I would think that if I was, I will be doing this again for some of the other locations where family members live to see if I can find anything else. So you don't know what you're going to find. And I think one of the things about some of these search engines that are out there is that you should go out there with an open mind and just think about possible ways of searching to see what's out there, almost like you're on a fishing trip. And sometimes you get lucky, and this is one time I think we got lucky with the information. Now, I don't know how long I've been talking, but it's longer than I planned on, I think. One of the things I wanted to finish up with is there are still other resources that are out there. They're not things that HeritageQuest considers their core content or core databases, but there are things that are worth searching for. Library of Congress photo collection, you can actually get to that through the Library of Congress also. But there are photos that are in the public domain for every state and good pictures of buildings, either in the town or the county that might be of interest to people, land ownership maps, and then again, the fact that over the years, HeritageQuest, which used to seem like it was just based on US records, also started to involve other places. And you can see South America, Caribbean, the UK, Irish, Canadian, more records from other places. And so there's lots of possibilities for things to search. And for tonight, I think it's beyond us to talk about it. So I'll just kind of wrap up with the important thing I think about HeritageQuest is it's a good database. It's easy to use. It's available for free at the library, and it's available at home, available to use at home for free. And once COVID is, as soon as COVID is over, our availability to use Ancestry at home for free will probably go away, but this one will still be out there to use. It's an easy platform to use, and they use the word familiar because a lot of people search for Ancestry, whether it's at library or on a subscription basis. So it's a similar platform to what people are used to searching with. And it contains collections from Ancestry and from Family Search and from other sources to give a nice broad set of records for us to search. And I always like to say that if you don't find something in one location, say you're searching for something on Ancestry, you don't find it there, back out of Ancestry and go to another search engine, whether it's Family Search or HeritageQuest, and check for the same information. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking at it from a different angle and you will find it. And with that, I will stop and take questions from the audience.
Anne is asking, does this source have many photos?
The photos you can actually go to through the Library of Congress, and it's in the hundreds of thousands of photos that you can get through there. Now, you can access them through HeritageQuest. I don't know that HeritageQuest specifically has photos of their own.
Do we have any other questions, or did that answer your question correctly, Anne? Any other questions? If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you're having troubles with that, you can also use the chat. That's perfectly fine. We'll just give them a moment or so here. Barb said that it was an excellent presentation, Don.
All right, thank you. I encourage everyone to explore it because it is an easy to use database set.
Anne also said thank you.
Oh, hi, Anne.
So I will just give it another moment here just in case we have any more questions that are currently being typed out. I am going to take this moment to just let everybody know. Hold on, there's a question. I'm going to interrupt myself and save that. How do you access it from home?
From home,
I think he missed the beginning.
Yeah, actually, the easiest way, if you're doing from Marshfield, it's a matter of going to the Marshfield Public Library, and the website is marshfieldlibrary.org. Then you're going to look for services and genealogy resources. And just, if I can get back to the beginning of my talk here, I can actually show you the steps here. So on the Everett Roehl Marshfield Public Library home site, there's a spot that says services. If you click on services, it brings up, okay, if I can make it work now. There, it brings up a drop-down box, and then you click on genealogy and history resources or research, and it brings up a drop-down box like this. HeritageQuest and Ancestry Library Edition are down on the bottom of the list. If you click on them, it will take you to the South Central Library System where you put in your library card number, and it takes you immediately to HeritageQuest if you're looking for HeritageQuest. And it works the same way regardless of what library you're affiliated with. They will have some electronic resource to share, and HeritageQuest is listed on, I think, all of them.
All right, hopefully that answered Tom's question well then. Marshall just wanted to comment that they are so glad they heard about the talk on Facebook. It was very informative. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to take this moment just in case we have any other questions coming through to say what I was going to say a moment ago. This video was streamed to our YouTube. It is going to take the evening to process, and tomorrow I will edit it so that it is not quite as long with the awkward sitting in front of the camera waiting to start part, because that's always fun. And then it will be available after that as well. Don mentioned several times throughout this evening's talk, he referenced last month's video. That one was right when we closed down again, and so my technology did not work correctly. I do have that video, and I'm hoping to also finally edit that correctly and have that uploaded as well tomorrow, so that both videos will become available for viewing tomorrow and forever after, so that you can refer to that, both of these, for any information. Parts of these might change with relevancy due to access because of the pandemic, but a lot of the information will still be very helpful to help you guide you through the different steps you're doing. And then finally, if you have any questions or you need additional help with any of these tools or these services, please call the Everett Roehl Marshfield Public Library and dial for our adult information desk. The staff is at that desk, even though we are closed at this time to the public. We are still there available to answer questions, and we will help you with any questions that you have regarding access to these resources. And that includes these resources or any other resources. You can also send in an email, or you can try contacting us via Facebook. Facebook is limited, the staff that has access, so you might wait slightly longer. We're really good about responding, but just be aware of that. The other two will get you directly to the right place. So, and I didn't have any other questions pop up, so I think we will call it a night.
Just one point. Next month, right now, tentatively, we have a discussion coming up next month on Clio, which is a link on the website for the Marshfield Public Library, and also on our annuals that were just digitized. And it'll give you information about how to use both resources. And that will be presented by Maida, our adult services librarian.
All right. Anything else to add on, Don?
Merry Christmas.
I think that's a great thing to add. Thank you to
Merry
everybody
Christmas,
for joining
everyone.
us. Have a happy holiday, a safe new year, and we'll see you again next year.